On Friday, it's your chance to participate in the Nashville SC Pick to Click, brought to you by Camarena Tequila. If you guess correctly which player scores a goal in the game Sunday, you win a prize pack and a 4-pack of tickets to an upcoming Nashville SC home game. Participate Friday morning at 9:45 with Robbie and Rex Road. Of course, first things first, it's the New England Revolution tonight. A big, big one for Nashville SC, and then Sunday they've got another road game. A little 3-game road trip this week, all in about an 8-day span. Big challenge, but these guys are playing some excellent soccer right now. You heard the Kung Fu fighting. A little incident of practice today. I always just shrug my shoulders and say, oh boy, what are the local newscasts going to look like tonight? I don't know if anybody caught it on tape, but apparently Brady Breeze, not to be confused with Tom Brady, Drew Brees. I know that's probably a well-told joke, dad joke, whatever, but
has to by now. If it hasn't, we'll make it now.
Yeah, I don't know if he's even going to make the team, but the first 4 questions to Mike Vrabel were about that incident. It's just unbelievable. It's something that you mark the time with every August, that if there is a fight, a skirmish, anything at a practice, it's going to be the first thing showed on the highlight shows. But it means really nothing.
Yeah.
I think.
Means nothing. To me, it's just fascinating because these guys will go out in these all-out brawls. Just like, because unfortunately, there's no video of the Giants fight, but apparently it was an all-out brawl, offense, defense. Logan Ryan got involved. Evan Ingram was throwing hands. Like, these guys will do all of this, and then the next day they're just going to be cool with each other. In some instances, it's like nothing happened, and like Tim says, in some instances, people don't get over it. Mm-hmm. So that's always the fascinating thing for me, and it gives you something else to talk about training camps. Like, position battles are cool. Position battles are more fun when they're punching each other. Then it's a little more interesting. Then we get a little saucy. Then the TV value of training camp definitely goes up a little bit. I almost cheer for kind of stuff like this, as long as no one tramples on like a player like Daniel Jones on the bottom of a pile. Obviously not ideal, but hey, if you're going to throw some hands, that shows some different types of competitiveness here. Do it now while it's not flaggable.
Also begs the all-time question of why would you ever punch a person with a football helmet on?
Oh, the age-old. Yeah, that is like I've had coaches refer to that as the stupid test before. I mean, if you're going to punch somebody with a helmet on, then you might fit that bill because that stuff's not soft. It is meant to protect the melon.
Eye candy with not a lot of substance. Now let's talk about something that might be pertinent here. We quizzed Tim Hasselbeck on the challenge for the Colts here, trying to figure out when can I get a gauge on how long Carson Wentz is going to be out. How long do I take before I try to either make a move or don't make a move to bring in another guy? Let's talk about the Phillip Rivers part of this. He went on the record. He talked. He retired in January. And the logical thing was for the media, especially the Colts media, to call up Phillip Rivers and see what he's doing. We know he's coaching high school football. And so he told the LA Times on Tuesday that he's staying in shape in case of situation. The Colts need an early season stint, not a late season stint. So let's read a little further. Quote, "I'm not quite there." Rivers, who's 39, told the LA Times, "I'm getting back there. I wouldn't have made weight if I had to report last week, that's for sure. But I'm getting back into the lifting and running. And shoot, I occasionally throw a ball around here in this heat. It's not too hard to get a good lather going. I'm just going to stay ready. I want to make sure I'm very clear. I'm not predicting I will play in December or January for that matter. 1, you've got to have somebody who wants you, and 2, it's got to be right. But I have not completely ruled that out." So I would agree with what Tim said, reading into those comments, that Phillip Rivers isn't going to come in, play a couple weeks, fill the gap until Wentz comes back, and then bolt out of there. He wants to, if he's going to play, he'd rather be sort of the closer, jump in midstream, a la Mike Fisher for the Predators, right? You've retired, but you recharge the batteries and you play for the stretch run. But that doesn't match up with what the Colts are looking for there. Fair to say?
Not at all. Oh, not at all. I mean, you need someone.
It also sounds like he's not in shape.
Yeah, exactly. The minute when he says, I wouldn't have made weight at this training camp, like that's a process in its own to be able to not only get to playing weight, get to playing shape and everything that entails. And even though it's not like Phillip Rivers is going to be running around the place for 1,000 yards in a season, he's going to have to be in NFL shape to be able to play the season. And that would take about half the regular season. And by that point, Carson Wentz is healthy. And then there's really no need for Phillip Rivers at that point. I kind of agree with what Tim said in the middle of that as well, where if you're the Colts, just say Jacob Eason's our guy right now, and I mean, say that publicly, and then behind closed doors, closely evaluate the options that are obtainable. I mean, is a Nick Foles trade obtainable? Is a Marcus Mariota trade obtainable? And be able to make that decision after a preseason game or the second preseason game, or after a couple weeks in training camp. It would have to be blatantly obvious to me that this guy cannot handle the starting position, and neither could Sam Ehlinger or Brett Hundley or the other guys on that roster for me to be able to make that move. I mean, I think you at least be able to have to see what Eason has, because you're going to have to go in with your best option one way or another, because their first 5 weeks of the season, you were playing teams that won at least 10 games. The easiest game on that schedule from those first 5 is going to be the Miami Dolphins, who went 10-6. Not exactly a cupcake schedule to start the season. So I think that's the best option they have. I mean, instead of negotiating teams, because you have no leverage in these negotiations, you're going to have to.
Let's go back to Rivers for a second here. This really fascinates me, because the timing, the timing of this article probably was asking Phillip Rivers, well, what about this Colts thing? Somewhere in here, it wouldn't shock me at all if Rivers said, I don't want to mention any specific team, because when you say things like, I'm getting back there, I'm getting back into the lifting and running, and the article says he's staying in shape in case a situation presents itself for a late season stint, none of that jives at all with the Colts. So you would think logically this article, the next question would be, well, what about the Colts? So either the person interviewing them has no clue, which I don't think is the case, or Rivers just said, I'll go on the record here, but I'm not going on the record about the Colts. Because it's just it doesn't make sense. So at 39, a guy that had trouble getting around last year, and who hasn't clearly, I mean, first of all, he's got a job. He's trying to coach a football team. So he's not full-time on the workout load. And he pretty much admits he hasn't prepared for a season like he normally would. And when you're 39, you got to work extra hard in the offseason to prepare your body for this. It does not sound like a viable option to me. Even though it's being discussed, this does not jive at all. If I'm Chris Ballard and I'm reading this, I'm like, well, cross him off the list.
I would say, cool. Thanks for getting back in shape. Maybe you can do something for somebody, but not us.
So then the question is that down the road, does Rivers come into the picture as a late season pickup? That seems a little bit unrealistic, but we'll see.
I mean, he didn't look good at the end of last year either. That arm. I mean, he
was limited. He was very limited,
incredibly limited.
Give him credit; they won 11 games with them in there. So it's not like he was horrendous, but he wasn't great, and he's a year older, and like we said, he's not prepared for the season like he has before. And
that's one of the things with Phillip Rivers too, is like Drew Brees can make do with an arm that's completely shot, because he's a very risk-averse quarterback. He's very self-aware. He knew the throws he could and couldn't make, and while being incredibly limited physically, was still being able to make the Saints a top 7 team in offensive DVOA, according to Football Outsiders, another analytics plug right there. But the Colts were not the same way, because Phillip Rivers used to lean a lot on that arm too, and his decision making hasn't always been the best, because he's always up there in interceptions. He throws a ton of picks, takes a ton of risks, nowhere near the type of risk aversion quarterback that someone who can make it longer in the league without that type of arm strength. I mean, at this point in Phillip Rivers' career, what pros really are there to him compared to anybody else that would be on your roster? It would have to be a dire situation for you to bring in Phillip Rivers that's way past his prime, still interception prone, and isn't able to stretch the field anymore.
So the obvious choice looks like Foles. If they're going to go down this road,
it would have to be.
And it does make a lot of sense. And as you heard Tim Hasselbeck say, he's basically telegraphing to the Colts, hey, man, rescue me. I'm sitting out here. I'm in a life raft. Come on over, scoop me out of the water, put me on your boat, and let's go play. But tell me this, Elijah, if you are Carson Wentz, you just got to this new team, you're reunited with Frank Reich, and then here comes Nick Foles. Well, that's a really interesting thing. I have a lot of confidence, if I'm the Colts, that Frank Reich figures out ways to have this work out. But what an awkward storyline to have pop up there.
Oh, you would hated it, yeah, if you're Carson Wentz, because you can't escape this guy. Especially, heaven forbid, Nick Foles starts the first 6-7 weeks of the season, and the Colts are 7-1 or 6-2 and are leading the AFC South. And then it's like, do we want to bring Carson Wentz back? And then it's this deja vu all over again. If you're Carson Wentz, injury, Nick Foles comes in, and the team is just better without you, or doesn't, miss a step. Like, for him, that's tough. But if you're the Colts, I mean, you can't really take that into consideration right now. If you're not confident in Jacob Eason can get you to at least 500 by the time he comes back. Because if you go 0-5 in that stretch, you're done. You're not making the playoffs. It would take something catastrophic for or here in Nashville with the Titans for that to be a reality, because that's the only way they could come back would be to win this division, especially with how loaded the AFC is. With the amount of teams that were really good playoff teams last year, the Dolphins were 10-6, didn't get in the playoffs. It'll be something similar this year because the AFC is just so deep. So their only chance would be to win the division. They go 0-5, it would take a meltdown or a catastrophic injury for the Titans not to be able to win that division. So if you're Carson Wentz and Foles, they are able to trade for Foles, and they go, 5-2, 6-2? You can't feel great about being able to keep that job. But if you're the Colts, you can't worry about that. Carson Wentz's mental fragility shouldn't be the reason you don't make a trade that could salvage your season when you have a roster that could win a Super Bowl with that defense and the amount of weapons they got, and finally investing in some receivers and wide receiver depth in the running game they have. The long term,
the pieces are in place.
The pieces are in place. You can't. That's got to be on the very bottom of the list of things you have to worry about. Is if Carson Wentz is going to cry himself to sleep if you bring in Nick Foles.
You've got two teams in the Colts and the Titans that are built to win this year. That's a dynamic that should be top of mind when you consider the moves that are made. This is a chance, even though you're trying to beat a very stacked AFC. This is a really deep conference for sure, but huge chance to go win another division title. What moves do you make? Stay tuned. We're going to come back. I'm going to introduce. We're going to read you a little piece that was done. It's interesting. It's a Russian interview with a guy named Nikita Zadorov. And if you're a Predator fan, you know who this is. He's played for a number of different teams. Played a lot of games against the Predators. But he was once a teammate for a good number of years with Nathan MacKinnon. He writes some things and he sort of equates it with playing with Michael Jordan. Not that he played with Michael Jordan, but probably like everybody else during the pandemic, we all are brushing up on our Michael Jordan history with The Last Dance. This was a huge theme. Playing with a guy who is so driven and so crazy almost as a teammate. What is that like? We're going to read a little bit of it, and we're going to ask the question, would you want to play with this guy? Nathan MacKinnon, one of the best players in the NHL for sure, but a little pull back the curtain, if you will, on some of his daily habits. Would that be fun to play with or not so fun? We're going to tell you about it when we come back. And then at 1 o'clock, we go to Houston, talk to Clint Sterner, and we talk Texans. Stay tuned. We're coming back here on Darren, Daunic, and Chase, ESPN 102.5 The Game. Nashville SC and the New England Revolution have a huge match to take over first place in the Eastern Division this Wednesday night. Join us for a fun watch party over on the east side. Boom Bars Craft Pizza and Tap House in East Nashville. You can enjoy great beer specials on Heineken Plus. They will be giving away tickets to the next Nashville SC home game. So mark your calendar to watch Nashville SC take on the New England Revolution. Tonight at 6, we'll have the game for you on 94.9 Game 2. And you can go hang out at the watch party with some other Nashville SC fans. They will be there at the new and improved Boom Bars Craft Pizza and Tap House, 1003 Russell Street, 5 Points in East Nashville. It is great stuff. That
Fantastic
place was
spot.
It took a lot of damage from the tornado. They have battled back. It looks great. That whole area, little by little, it's going to be better than ever when it's all done. It's already taking shape. So hang out on the east side. You're going to like it if you've been watching Nashville SC. Now, as we mentioned before, Chase, I sent you this last night. It was a really interesting it was a Russian interview, so it's been translated. And the heading is, and I don't even know, it got sort of recirculated onto one of my people that I follow. It says, this excerpt from a Russian interview where Nikita Zadorov talks about Nathan MacKinnon is pretty, I don't know, inspiring, eye-opening, the literal price of greatness. Now, you tell me what your reaction was when you read this. I'm just going to read a quick thing. This is Nikita Zadorov, who I'm trying to think. I think he's still on the Blackhawks. I don't think he changed addresses. There was a lot of speculation he might get picked up by the Kraken. But he has gone from the Sabres to then Colorado for a long time, and then now the Blackhawks. So he played with Nathan MacKinnon for a while. It's no longer a teammate of his, but this was his insight. I saw the progression in Nate's game. He's such a pro. He has a dietologist. He pays $50,000 a year. He has a live-in doctor, physiotherapist in his house during the season. He pays him $1,000 each day. Now, I don't know if this has been verified. This is just
or math checked.
Math checked. I don't know. Rubles, dollars. I don't know. But the point is, this is an investment here. In addition, he rents him an apartment. He rents him an apartment. He has his own chef. He pays another $100,000 a year. He simply invests in himself and his own body so he can play at the highest level. So, dietologist, $50,000 a year. Doctor, physiotherapist, $1,000 a day, according to Zadorov.
So I guess $365,000 a year.
Okay, I guess. I don't know. And then another $100,000 for a chef. He's crazy that way. He eats right. He doesn't drink. He drinks only water. 2 years ago in Colorado, he got rid of all the pop, ice cream, desserts. He got rid of himself with chickpea pasta. That has reasons that Colorado got such an improvement in performance. You have the offseason for that. When you come here, there will be none of that because we're winning the cup. All the young guys see it. They look up at him. They try to do their part. MacKinnon is like Michael Jordan. I don't want to make a direct comparison, but his way of thinking is very similar to MJ. He can be a jerk to his teammates, line mates. You need to accept that. And it would improve you as a hockey player as a result. If you can't accept it, you're off the team. He's always the hardest working guy. He comes out 30 minutes before practice, always working on his hands. Young guys see that, and he still wants to improve. It motivates them, the young players, to work even harder. If you miss a pass in practice, we had young players come over during the playoffs, like 15 centimeters in front of the blade of the stick. He doesn't move his stick to catch the puck. He stops everything, turns around, made a bad pass. He doesn't use that word, but bad / bleepity bleep kind
Crappy
of pass.
No.
He's a guy that demands the most and demands that everyone leaves everything out there to maximize their abilities. So, Hal Gill saw this, I noticed, and he said, 2 things would happen if I played with him. Either I would kill him or he would kill me within 10 games. So that is really the dynamic. It got talked about a lot with The Last Dance with Jordan. Now, Nathan MacKinnon doesn't have the skins on the wall that Jordan does. But Jordan started doing this before he ever won any rings. Nathan McKinnon is one of the 5 best players in the NHL. Completely dynamic. The stuff aside about the investment at home, I don't know what he'd be like to live with. It sounds like he's got a high regimen, high discipline level. That's one thing.
Might have to ask his $500,000 doctor that he pays.
Or $365, $1,000 a day. Sounds like we could get if we could just hit him up with a job. What could we do for $100 a day or something?
Right? Yeah. I mean, I mow his lawn or something. I don't know. Yeah.
Sounds like you make a little money on the side just doing some things for Nathan at the house. But the question would be, what do you think of this? Like, some people's reaction on Twitter was, oh my gosh, that's the ultimate guy. I'd love to have him on my team. What a driven guy. This is amazing. And then others were more like, how? They'd be like, okay, would I really want to play with this guy? Is this helping? Does this really help Colorado win a championship? I think it's a fine line.
Oh, it's a great question to ask, too. And personally, I mean, if you step in between me and an ice cream sandwich after a game, I don't care for Hal Gill. I think we're throwing hands. I think that's how that dynamic's going to go. But not everybody's built the same, too. And I love having this conversation because, like, the thing about leadership is there's not one direct way to do it because everybody is different. If everybody was the same, then there would be one way to do everything. It's like in college basketball. Tom Izzo and Jay Wright are 2 of the more accomplished coaches to exist in the sport. They are 2 totally different coaches. Tom Izzo will grab your jersey. He'll scream in your face. He don't care if your grandmother's watching. He is going to do what he can to do what he thinks is going to get the best out of you. Whereas Jay Wright is mild-mannered, but also a good leader. He's a collaborative type of leader. There's some that are authoritarian, some that are a little more collaborative. Draymond Green is wired more like Tom Izzo. That's why that marriage worked really well. That's why they were very successful when he was on that team and was the best player on that team because the best player mirrored the coach. Draymond Green wouldn't do as well in Villanova with Jay Wright coaching. The same way some players at Villanova would not do the same way if Tom Izzo's screaming in their face. People are just wired differently. I would not be able to play with Nathan McKinnon because if you stop practice to make a point that I made a bad pass, then A, I don't think we're going to get much done. B, I don't think that's going to help me much. We can talk about it after. We can stay after practice, and I can practice that pass, and we could work around it that way. That type of intimidation wouldn't fly as well with me personally, but for some, that's how you get the best out of them. Some people, like with Kobe Bryant, he had teammates that's how he got the best out of him. Sasha Vujacic got the best out of himself because Kobe Bryant demanded so much out of him in practice, even if it meant embarrassing him in front of everybody else. You did not get the best out of Nick Young because he did not, the way they have their practices with Kobe Bryant being more of an authoritarian type leader, they did not fall in line with that. Those teams were awful, and you didn't get the best out of those players because that's just not how those guys were wired as well. It really just depends on the type of person you are.
I think we all were dealing with this. You could see a lot of the teammates of Michael Jordan try to, in a very diplomatic way. Will Perdue was one of them. Steve Kerr was certainly one of them. B.J. Armstrong throughout, talking about how, there were some really rough days where they could not stand it. Like, who is it? They hate it. But they all sort of admitted that maybe it did bring out the best. It made them better players. Does that make it worth it? I think they would say, well, they got some rings, so it's got to be worth it to some degree. But is there a different way that they could have done it and still won those rings? That's the question that we'll never answer.
It's a great question, yeah.
And Michael Jordan, I love when he defended how he did it, even though he got very emotional. He said, there's nothing that I was demanding other players to do that I wasn't doing. That means a lot.
Which is what made him a really bad GM down the road, because not everybody is Michael Jordan.
Nathan McKinnon, it looks like he's exhibiting a lot of the same things. So it's a really insightful piece by Zadorov, who I would never known one way or the other that he was. I don't know what precipitated this conversation, but it was a really good window into a guy's personality. A lot of people did say that the captain of the Avalanche is Gabe Landeskog for a reason, and they went out of their way to bring him back, not just because Landeskog is a pretty darn good player, but also he's a guy that tempers that dynamic in the locker room really well, that McKinnon, maybe if he were the captain, maybe that wouldn't go over so well with some people. You need sort of a buffer. So that's the interesting part. Michael Jordan, unquestioned leader of the Bulls. McKinnon's doing this. He's not even the captain. It's it's Landeskog that's the captain. So just something to keep in the back of your mind with the Avalanche coming back into the Predators division this year. And they will be a heavy favorite to win the Central. They'll be among the top 2 or 3 favorites to win the Cup
easily
this year.
Mm-hmm. Makes you want to be a fly on the wall during those practices, though. Yeah. That's for sure.
I'll be watching morning skate a little closer next time.
Ears we perked a little bit.
See if he misplays some passes or starts yelling at somebody during the morning skate. All right, when we come back, we'll shift back to football. We're going to talk to Clint Sterner, covers the Houston Texans down in the Lone Star State. A lot of issues for the Texans. We'll try to make some sense of it when we come back here on Darren, Daunic, and Chase. Final hour, Darren, Daunic, and Chase here on ESPN 102.5 The Game. We've been talking a lot of Titans training camp today, just repeating the top story. Julio Jones missed another day of practice. Mike Vrabel saying, we're going to be cautious with him. Get used to it. The Julio watch will be a thing. He's not going to practice every day. Some days he might even be on the side field doing some stuff. So it didn't take long for them to go into that mode. So they were somewhat forthright. They haven't given you any specifics on what he might be dealing with right now, but they feel confident that they have a track to get him ready to go for opening day. So that was probably the most noteworthy thing that came out of practice today. They were back in pads. Taylor Lewan still not working in the drills, just doing the teams, not the team stuff, the scrimmage stuff, just doing the individual drills. So he is progressing well, likes where he's going, but he's not out there just yet. Now, we switch our attention to a division rival, the Houston Texans. And to talk some Texans with us, Clint Sterner, who we have had on a number of times before, of course, has a history here. His days quarterbacking Pat Sperduto's Nashville Cats. Clint, great to talk to you again.
Yeah, good to talk to you guys. I got some other history there in Tennessee when in '98 when I helped you guys win a national title. So there's probably some ties there when they hear that name Sterner as well. But I appreciate you linking it to the Cats from the jump, man. I appreciate that.
Well, no question about it, Clint. We've talked to you about that before for sure. You've been a great sport and really a great role model. Telling people how to handle stuff like that. I think everybody who plays sports, on some stage, you're going to have something that doesn't go your way, and you got to deal with it, right? It's how you handle it that's the most important thing long term.
Yeah, absolutely, man. It's sports, and there's a lot tied up in to it. And right now, it's as big a business as it's ever been. But man, it teaches you life lessons, and you got a choice. When stuff like that happens to you, man, you can tuck your tail, you can deny it, you can let it cause problems, or you can own it and learn from it and be a better person, a better player for several years after that because of it. Heck, you want to talk about a guy that can coach some ball security now. I work with young quarterbacks who coach some ball security. So I can find the silver lining in damn near anything after going through that. Yeah, it's a game, and that was unfortunate, but it's made me a better man, better person, better employee. So no doubt about it, man.
So Clint, we've since we last talked, we knew there was going to be sort of a list of things that the Texans had to try to sort out as they bring in a new coaching staff and they try to move forward here. Do you have any more sense on when you might get a little more clarity on Deshaun Watson and how? What's the dynamic?
For the Texans has been made very, very difficult, whether it's hiring a GM or hiring a head coach or dealing with the Deshaun Watson situation. You thought a lot of that left when Bill O'Brien was fired, but there's clearly some struggles in navigating some of the more adverse situations, processes, I guess, if you will, that NFL franchises have to navigate. You just hope that clarity in terms of Deshaun Watson, I think, is probably slid this thing a little bit more into not knowing what's going on, not knowing exactly why they're him. Participating in practice beyond some of the stretching and some of the individual period stuff. And then he just casually took a knee. Ball was spotted in a team period, and on a knee, hoodie on, helmet on the ground. And in no level of football is that acceptable. In no level of team sports, whether it's peewee, high school, college, pros, it's just unacceptable. And that was the visual that the media was given. That was the visual that fans were given. And then the message the head coach relayed was, it's a ramp-up period. We'll watch the film and see if we're going to give him some more reps down the road, which everybody knew was smoke and mirrors. So I don't think they've handled it well. There's no more clarity now than there was a week ago on the Deshaun Watson front, and now every move he makes is going to be national news.
I just try to put myself in the shoes of somebody that's trying to prepare, especially the quarterbacks, but really everybody. You got a brand new head coach who's never coached in the league before, and you're dealing with this. Just his presence out there, just in this sort of nebulous. I guess they figured they had to have him out there for a while for legal purposes. I don't know why, but it just seems like that's so counterproductive to a team trying to find a new identity. Just because his presence alone is gonna cloud things.
Yeah, look, I agree with you. I think you said that perfectly, and I think it's less about the players, though, guys. I think I've said this from the jump. I think professional athletes, one thing you have to do really, really well, regardless of your talent level, regardless of where you come from, you've got to be able to compartmentalize, whether it's marital issues at the house or legal issues off the field, or you're the owner of the GM says something in the public that impacts your starting position, and you feel like it's unfair. You've got to be able to put blinders on, go in that meeting room, learn the game, learn your responsibilities, and then you got to go out there on the football field and execute. And I think players, for the most part, the ones that stick in the league, they have the ability to do that under extreme adversity. And so I don't think that Deshaun being around so much impacts the players as it does the ones you mentioned. You got a head coach that's trying to win over a locker room, that's trying to get what's the one thing we hear new coaches talk about all the time? You got to buy in. They got all these different systems and all these different coaching staffs, but you always hear college, pros, if you can get the locker room to buy in, then you can make change quickly. And getting the locker room to buy in, I think, is made – it's up to you however you feel about it, but it's made more difficult when Deshaun Watson, the only individual, literally the only individual with a heartbeat right now on the planet that's publicly said they don't believe in what you're doing to the point where they want out, is literally in your locker room and in your meetings. I don't know, how that makes sense for David Culley, who's trying to flip this culture and the buy-in. I don't know how it makes sense for a guy like Nick Caserio, who's trying to rebuild the culture and get buy-in and flip the locker room, to insert Deshaun Watson back in there. So I agree with you, man. I think the players will be fine, but it makes, from Cal McNair, the owner, all the way down to the head coach, David Culley, it makes their life and their job and what they've been tasked with much more difficult, in my opinion. And again, I don't care if you believe it makes it tenfold more difficult or if it's just a little bit. It's unnecessary, and I don't understand having him at practice for damn sure.
What are your thoughts on Tyrod Taylor? He's certainly seen a lot. He's been in a lot of different situations, a lot of adversity. He had the punctured lung last year, of course. He's setting the table for Baker Mayfield. Not long before that, went through some tough times in Buffalo, but I've always liked his makeup. So do you think he ends up being the guy that starts off as their quarterback, and how do you think he's handled himself in this situation?
Well, look, he is the perfect fit for what Houston's going through right now, to block out all the adversity, block out all the noise, and really set the bar, at a high level in terms of being accountable, showing up on time, knowing what your assignment is, and demanding that out of each other, being accountable to each other. I mean, he's a guy that he's had to do that his entire career in order to stay as long as he has. He's not a guy that obviously with size and arm strength, and I know he's athletic, but I don't we got guys like Lamar Jackson and Kyler Murray in this league now playing a position. He's nowhere near what those guys are. So, he's not stuck around because of his tangible assets. He's stuck around because of his intangibles. And when you talk about intangibles being of the utmost importance, the quarterback for the Houston Texans right now is the king of that group. And so he's come in and he's been a stabilizer for some seriously rocky waters. And I think he sets a great example every day for veterans that are playing for a contract and young players that are new to the league. I think he's a very, very solid stabilizer is the right word. I think that's who he has always been. That's why he's been a journeyman quarterback, and he does it really, really well. I think he's probably a little bit better than most give him credit for physically, but there's still a low ceiling. There's still going to be guys that, Davis Mills, the kid from Stanford. I mean, physically, he's a lot better than what a guy like Tyrod Taylor brings to the table. But when you need an extreme level, high level of poise in the locker room and poise in the pocket and understanding the offense and knowing the ins and outs, and you got to lean on Tyrod Taylor. And so right now, I don't think he's a long-term answer. I don't know that he'll start all year long, but I think he is of utmost importance right now for this organization and this roster for sure.
Talking to Clint Sterner from 610 in Houston, and former Nashville Cats great as well, is on the line with us. And Clint, you mentioned Davis Mills too. That was a name we talked about yesterday when we were talking about week one odds for starting quarterbacks around the league, and Tyrod Taylor is the odds-on favorite to be the Texans, but Davis Mills wasn't very far behind. I know he's a highly rated prospect coming out of high school, had a little bit of a turbulent college career, but what are you seeing from him in camp so far? And I know you just mentioned Tyrod Taylor might not being the starter all season long, but how possible is it that we end up seeing a lot of Davis Mills in 2021?
Well, I don't know how much you're going to see, right? We've only seen 7 practices, and he struggled as most rookies do. He struggled mightily with the one practice that Tyrod Taylor missed. He threw several interceptions, which in my opinion, look, it's never as good as it seems or as bad as it seems when it comes to quarterback play specifically. And so, he's clearly not ready now. He clearly needs reps. But I think you got to take into consideration, guys, the Texans' position right now. I mean, the Texans are at the end of the day in the same position the Jets are in, the same position the Jacksonville Jaguars are in, the same position that ultimately the Chargers were in last year, where you've got this organization and you've got a quarterback that's extremely talented that you've invested a good draft pick in, and you've got to find out if that guy is worth not if he's a franchise quarterback or if he's your long-term answer, but is he worth investing another year in beyond this season? And in turn, then you can go use your first-round draft pick or your first-round draft picks that you get in a Deshaun Watson trade on something other than a quarterback, right? It's hard to sit here and say, well, he's not Russell Wilson. That's the only third-string quarterback that became a Super Bowl winner and a franchise quarterback. That's not where the Texans are right now. The Texans are in a position where you've got a year with Davis Mills before you've got to make a big-time decision of who you draft in the first round of next year. And it's probably going to be a top 10 pick. You know, you're probably going to have a shot at a couple of quarterbacks. And do you want to make that move, or do you believe you want to invest another year in a guy like Davis Mills? So when he plays, I don't know, guys. I think, to me, it's more about like what happened Saturday, where he got the first-string reps. They were in red zone work, and he threw 3 interceptions in the end zone. Now, that's going to tell them a lot more than the days where he goes out there and throws 4 touchdowns and 5 touchdowns and really dominates in practice. What kind of guy is he when adversity strikes? That both in the moment and the next day when he sits in a team meeting and has to watch all the mistakes he made with his entire team. How does he bounce back? That's when you find out what kind of guy he is. It's never going to be about, for me, there was limited talent. Like, there was not enough arm talent. There was not enough arm strength. I wasn't big enough. I wasn't fast enough. I didn't play enough in college. This guy doesn't have that problem. This guy has all the tangibles that you would want at quarterback. It's about the intangibles and how he handles adversity. And the sooner they see that, the better off they'll be able to make a decision next draft. I don't know if that means he plays half the season. Their bye week, I believe, is week 10, maybe the last 7 games of the season. We'll see what happens. But Davis Mills is definitely a big part of this organization.
An admirable character, and is just now getting his franchise quarterback, going through the legal situation he is right now. The roster not looking fantastic, playing in a division that has the Indianapolis Colts and the Tennessee Titans, 2 pretty good football teams. I mean, the chips are kind of stacked against him for a guy who's definitely earned the opportunity to become a head coach, and a lot of first-year head coaches aren't given great opportunity or great situations right off the bat because someone got fired there because the situation was so bad. But how would you say he's handled that, and how what's the kind of the vibe you guys get from him as a first-year head coach?
Well, look, I think he's in over his head. I think he's being put in a very, very tough spot by the organization multiple times, and I don't think it's helped his case of being a head coach for the first time. I think he's doing the best that he can, but I think when you look at, like you said, like went to the locker room, they're probably not very talented. They probably rolled the dice several times in the draft and in free agency, and it hadn't worked out. And so you've got a lot of problems when you take over. But David Culley has picked, I think, hell, I'll even challenge you to go back 30 or 40 years, find a more dysfunctional organization that, Lou Holtz said, I heard Lou Holtz say it a long time ago, the quickest way out of a hole is to stop digging, right? The Texans are still digging on a daily basis. They still find a way to dig. And then the problem is you push David Culley out there in front of the media, and it's tough on him. So he's doing the best he can. He's never been down this road before, even though he's been in the league for a long time. But, man, he's been dealt some bad cards, man. And it just keeps getting worse. You just hope one day this organization gets beyond Deshaun Watson. They get beyond what Jack Easterby and Bill O'Brien did to this organization over the last 18 to 24 months in terms of salary cap issues and draft capital issues. And you hope that Nick Caserio is able to pull them out. And if David Culley can survive that, then so be it. But if he does, man, we're going to all need to stand up and applaud the guy, because it is a very steep climb that he's still at the very bottom of the mountain right now. He's at the bottom of the cliff right now, boys, and it is steep. So I feel for the guy, man. I really do. He's put in a bad spot, and I don't know that anybody could navigate it perfectly, but man, it's been rough over the last couple of months for sure.
Well, Clint, we thank you for coming on and sort of spelling out what it's like there on a daily basis right now as they try to navigate through this. Great to catch up with you. We'll talk to you again down the road when we talk some Texans.
Yeah, man, I hate that it's all doom and gloom right now, guys, down here, but hopefully they'll turn the page and we'll get on a little happier note, man. Good luck to y'all, and don't give Julio too much hell about not practicing, man. You bet, man. Y'all be good.
All right, Clint Sterner, great perspective. Always love talking football with him. Boy, did he ever spell out what a mess it is down there. I think we knew it was a mess. Part of the reason we were calling Clint is to figure out how much of a mess, but can you imagine how awkward it would be to be running practice for legal purposes? They had to let him come to camp, but it's like, okay, what do we do? He's not going to be the starter. Could be suspended any day.
It's not going to be playing. He's quarterback in this league. Can't use him. All the stuff's going on. The team's not going to be very good. It just has to be incredibly awkward. And like, I would challenge you to find. I think I would rather get in a fight with my entire team. Get kicked out of practicing early, run wind sprints, and have to sit in one meeting with the Texans quarterback room. I don't think I can handle it like that. I can handle it, but like, it wouldn't be ideal, obviously. It's got to be awful, especially for someone like Davis Mills. So this is your first training camp experience getting to do this.
Why did they draft him? They didn't have a first-round pick or a second-round pick. They got one shot in the third round, and they pick him?
I don't know.
Is he really a guy that could turn into something
and I think,
special? Like, as Clint said, they're very likely to be finishing low this year, and then you have a crack at one of the top couple picks, and maybe that's where you try to find your next quarterback.
Investing a third in a quarterback like that when you probably could have gotten somebody. That could be a somewhat, not even a serviceable quarterback, because like the focus won't be to win right now. If you know you're not getting Deshaun Watson,
you're almost better off not winning.
You're better off not winning. So that's what makes that move puzzling to me. I mean, I do see a little bit of potential in Davis Mills because he does have a lot of physical gifts. It's just like I mentioned earlier, his college career was a little tumultuous. It wasn't a smooth sailing ride. He wasn't exactly engineering these great offenses. It's hard to I can see where the potential's at, but that's a multi-year project for an investment. That's your first pick in that draft when there's clearly a lot of other holes they need to address too, like the wide receiver position.
Well, there's too many to count, really, when you get down to it. So
yeah, the lines.
All of this circles back to our theme of the day is what a huge opportunity it is for the Titans to try to win and load up and try to win this year.
Oh, because they will not be a threat. I mean, whatsoever.
It just
regardless.
Looks like there's just no way.
It's Taylor Mills.
And, of course, there's a huge mountain to climb, too, for the Jaguars. We'll see, how competitive they are in the first year. Nowhere to go but up for them, too. So we'll take a break. When we come back, we will talk more as we continue to head through the final hour here. We might even mix in a little baseball talk. Did you see the Atlanta Braves and the Philadelphia Phillies? But I know there's a lot of Braves fan out there. It's getting very interesting in the NL East because of my New York Mets, which are a little inept right now. They are struggling. And the Braves, with all of the issues that they've had, and they've had a ton, they're right there. They're right there. Race is on. They kind of knew that. They gambled at the trade deadline to bring some new guys in. Got a little infusion of life. And what do you know? 5 the game. The ultimate social experience is coming to Nashville. My Wine Society presents Blended Festival, August 13th and 14th at First Horizon Park. That's where the sounds play, where live performances are going to be taking place by Cascade, Lil Jon, Matt Still, Blanco Brown, Bryce Vine, and more. So enjoy Blended's massive 100-foot wine tasting tent. Indulge in culinary activations by Nashville's hottest chefs. There's also Blended's relaxing wellness lounge, VIP village, and a whole lot more. Get Blended. Tickets on sale right now at blendedfestival.com. Use promo code Cromwell at checkout for 10% off of your ticket. Back here on Darren, Daunic, and Chase. And, Elijah, I'm a little down. You can tell I don't have much pep in my step talking baseball right now because
I can see you want to avoid it.
Yeah, the Mets have lost 6 of 7. There has been sort of a cruise control that they've been on for a while just because the other teams in the division, you've got the Nationals who just traded everybody because they couldn't even flirt with 500. They just figured, you know what, we're better off retooling.
Fire sailing, doing what the Cubs did, essentially.
Then you had the Phillies and the Braves that said, you know what, I just look at this Mets team and I don't see much. So I'm gonna try to make some moves, make myself better. So our buddy Dave Dombrowski, Nashville homeowner, we've talked to him a few times with his deal with the Nashville Stars group. Now he's piloting the moves by the Phillies. So he went out and got a closer, got a couple of starting pitchers. Lo and behold, they're a little bit over 500. And the Braves went out and brought in essentially a whole new outfield, brought back Adam Duvall, Jorge Soler, plugged a couple of gaps with some bullpen, and now you've got a couple of teams that are just right on the heels of the New York Mets, who everybody says should win the division, but I think we're going to have a nice little pennant race down the stretch here.
Oh, it's going to be a really fun race. I mean, those 3 teams separated by 2.5 games right now. What I love what the Braves did. Now they're already getting paid instant dividends from Soler hitting a home run last night. Who can be a frustrating player. He is the modern Major League Baseball hitter. He flirts with 200. I think after last night, he might be hitting over 200 now. I'm not 100% sure. But hits a ton of home runs, and he doesn't just barely hit them out of the park. Like, this guy crushes baseballs.
He hit, 39 or 41 a couple years ago?
The last full 162-game season, hit about 42 home runs.
He set the Royals record. That's not exactly a hitter's park. A home run park never has been.
Exactly. So putting him in a better park will be a lot interesting too. But I mean, he is modern baseball right now, Jorge Soler, and I love the Rodriguez pickup too to bolster that bullpen, which is desperately needed for the Braves. It's going to be interesting, and a lot of these teams are going to be. It's going to be who can mess up the least, because I mean the Mets are only 4 games above 500 right now, and despite losing 6 of 7, still have the lead. A lot of these teams can't get out of their own way, unfortunately. And I know for the Braves, I saw like a snapshot over the last month. They just alternated wins and losses. They can't string together multiple wins in a row.
And that's been the Mets too. They're 20 and 25 in the last 45 games.
And what's the latest on DeGrom too?
We don't know.
That's the biggest thing too. I mean, if you're not going to have DeGrom, then this is really going to get a lot interesting, because you don't pencil a win in whenever he's been pitching this year.
They haven't hit all year. They're the lowest runs per game outfit in the National League, which is crazy.
And disappointing considering all the moves they made to pick up extra bats.
On paper, they should not be this bad offensively, but they are. Early in the season, it was because of injuries, but they've played enough of the season now. They should be hitting better, and they're just a lot of the guys just have not come around. Lindor's out a few more weeks, so you don't know what's going to happen. They've won with tremendous contributions from depth players, more than they should expect, but they've done a great job there. They've played excellent defense. They've had very good pitching. But as you mentioned, DeGrom is in a 2-week shutdown period now. He's about a week in just to be ready to go by September the 1st. That's what we're hoping for. And Tehran, his antenna went up when we started talking about this. He's popped in here.
His Mets radar went off immediately once we started talking Mets.
And I know Tehran is a glass half full guy, and I am too, but I'm a little worried. But in best case, you would have DeGrom, Syndergaard, and hopefully Carlos Carrasco down the stretch, along with Marcus Stroman. You have a really good team. Last night, The Marlins are down to the scraps. They traded everybody as well. A lot of young players. The Mets have lost.
Now, stop me if you heard that one before with the Marlins.
Yes.
Them trading away the players they have and being down to scraps.
The Mets have 23 games with the Marlins and the Nationals out of the remaining 50-something. The problem is it's the whole Kumar Rocker thing. So
as Tehran's shaking his head behind me, he also has some thoughts about the Kumar Rocker situation.
You're killing me, man. You're killing me.
I know. I'm just so
Throw the towel.
I'm still bitter about that, but that does have me thinking too. What is next for Kumar? There's been no plan laid out. It's early. This is still new. They've got some time to sort it out. There's really no indication I'm getting from anybody here that he's going to come back to school. The track record of Scott Boras is to take guys to the independent league, but where would you rather be? Where would you rather be? I realize that having him, it may not be the best thing for his stock to go and be the ace for the Vanderbilt staff again and pitch 120 innings, high stress, going for a championship again. That may not be attractive to scouts. But is there a way? But like, if I'm Kumar Rocker, I still think that there's something about, especially with the NIL, where you can be making some money in the meantime.
Well, it makes it a more attractive option than it's ever been. I mean, if you asked this question 2 years ago, I think the answer is pretty easy. Go play for money somewhere, wherever it can be.
He's the most recognizable name in college baseball. And so that's maybe not the same thing as being the Alabama quarterback, but I think you could make a pretty good living or side cash to make it worth your while, even if you walked on to come back to Vanderbilt. If all the scholarship money is gone, you would be able to pay for tuition and then keep a big chunk. Been on billboards, all of that stuff.
Oh, he's the most marketable player in a big media market.
I have not talked to any of the Vanderbilt staff about this, but just brainstorming about it, I just wonder how that would weigh on pitching in an independent league where you're going to be out of sight, out of mind. Nobody's going to be watching anything you do. But you would be preparing. You would be on a team that I'm sure would just be very conscious of your situation, and you would be biding time until the draft comes back around. But I think there's a lot to offer Kumar Rocker coming back to school for a year, even though it has been sort of Jeff Passan right away said he's not likely to come back. He's not coming back to Vanderbilt.
All reports I've seen.
But there's no commitment he's made to anybody else. If he really wanted to do it, could he not go to Scott Boras and say, you know what? I'd like to come back to school. Now, if you're Tim Corbin or if you're back, we understand your situation. His innings, manage his workload, just being very you're saying, it's a luxury to have him back. It's not something we expected. We understand we're not getting the Kumar Rocker we've had for the last 3 years because of his situation. We're trying to win, but there's no better teammate. There's no better guy that sets an example for what's going to be a pretty young pitching staff. I see a way it could work. I don't know what Scott Boras would tell him to do. Scott Boras' wheels are turning always about him being marketable and an asset and stuff. But I just think with the NIL and the ability to make money off of his name, image and likeness, there's a lot to be said for coming back to Vanderbilt.
It makes that option a whole lot more appealing than it used to, and that's really
maybe
one of
I'm
the things
crazy.
with NIL. I mean, I think that does beat the independent league. I mean, the independent league sounds awful. I mean, if I'm Kumar Rocker, to me, my first initial reaction would be I'd rather be pitching in a Vanderbilt uniform and being a little more marketable if that's what Scott Boras is pushing, but he doesn't want him to go back to Vanderbilt. You're certainly more marketable pitching at Vanderbilt, appearing in the College World Series, than you are with the Savannah Bananas for 50 games.
The St. Paul Saints.
And pitching, 3 or 4 innings a game? I mean, they're going to be so conscientious about his shoulder, and they should be anyway. Everybody should be.
And Vanderbilt could do that.
And they could do that too. Exactly. Personally, I wouldn't rule out maybe if the Japanese league would be an option because the level of competition you're playing. However, it might be a little riskier because say he goes to Japan and just gets rocked and just does not play to what we're accustomed to seeing Kumar Rocker pitch, then that's going to really hurt the draft status. But the upside is he goes over there, pitches well, dominates. then that
But-
really should only make it go up.
Yes.
Because you're playing against such good competition over there
But this
than you
is-
would be in college baseball.
But this is what I'm not clear on, and I have heard people talk about this. I don't know the specifics of the rule, but I think if you sign a contract with a Japanese team and they have their own minor league system there, you don't go back into the draft. You can't just say, I'm going to – you can. He
you
can
just
go
get
to,
signed.
He
Yeah,
can
you
go
have
to
get signed
Japan.
as a free agent. Yeah.
But when is he eligible to do that? Like he's got to fulfill his contract. Maybe he signs just a 1-year deal, but then does he become a free agent for anybody to pick up in the major leagues, or does he go back into the draft? I think it's a little fuzzy. I don't know
if I were
we know
him,
the
I'd
rule.
prefer the free agency route too than going back into the draft.
I can guarantee.
Honest, because
I think he can get some immediate money.
Rocker and the Mets will be willing to sign him after drafting him.
Yeah, and we know that's water under the bridge here. And we know the day is going to come looking at the same thing that the Mets just looked at and said, what's it worth? Even if he's just a total free agent. But somebody's going to step up. Just takes one team. Somebody's going to step up and pay him a bonus. That's just the entry level. Then from there, it's up to Kamar to do it, and that's why I'd be willing to invest a pretty good amount.
But you
in
got to
him,
think
knowing what we know about him.
Yeah, and that likelihood has to be relatively high, don't you think? Given that the MRI that scared the Mets away was apparently the same one that Vanderbilt has had access to for the last 2 or 3 years. I mean,
Their position is the MRI and what the Mets just saw. There's really no difference between that MRI and the MRI that they looked at Kamara's shoulder when he came in.
So if Vanderbilt sees that as fine, and the Mets just don't, I mean, the odds are one of the other, 29 other teams in baseball, surely one or two, I mean, you're probably getting 7 or 8 that are like, we can get this kind of pitcher for something that we're not concerned about on this MRI. And it could scare the teams away, but then the law of averages, if it's so close, then it's not going to be a full-on 100% every team in the MLB is going to be scared over it. You can really raise the price tag of his contract by hitting the open market like that.
I'm just wondering if it's going to be a consideration. Especially I try to put myself in the shoes of Kamar, and I have no idea what he's thinking, but that there's a comfort level coming back to school. Scott Boras, I'm sure he's well aware of the successes of the Vanderbilt program, but I think his focus is going to be probably away from that and to start his professional career. The question is what path. The independent league we know is an option out there. I just think the Vanderbilt option for a year with NIL is a better option than the independent. The Japanese league or some other overseas
South
league.
Korea, that league's pretty good.
What I don't know is how do you enter back into the Major League pool? If your ultimate goal is to play Major League Baseball, how does that work? What are the rules there? That's what we need to explore. On that, we'll take a break. When we come back, we will come back and wrap things up. We'll have the final segment as we count down towards Jared and company. Jared and Caroline will be breaking down everything. Jared was at practice today for the Titans. No Julio Jones. We had a little clarity on their plan with him. It shouldn't be a shock to anybody. He's not going to practice that much. You knew going in that was probably going to be the case. You'd like for him to get some reps. That wasn't the case today, but Mike Vrabel did shed a little bit of light on that. We'll come back with more after this on Darren, Daunic, and Chase, ESPN 102.5 The Game.
You know what? We're going to be probably cautious with Julio. So the Julio watch, will continue. We'll have a plan for him, but I would anticipate, that he would be, that we would be all on the same page, by the time the season started. You're going to see him out there at times. You're going to see him on the other field, and so he's played a lot of games, and that's kind of where we're going to be each and every day. So we can kind of all be on the same page, and how we're going to have to address it every day.
Mike Vrabel earlier today talking about Julio Jones. It would have been interesting if Mike Vrabel had said that before the first practice, because that would have made perfect sense, because I think we all would have expected this. But he started off, everybody's excited to see him, and then he leaves a practice, hasn't practiced the last couple of days. The good thing about that is Mike Vrabel communicating some, and you get the sense that this isn't anything serious. And when you take it into the big picture, you kind of felt like this is, at this stage of his career, this is probably the route they were going to go with no matter what. So we'll have more on that throughout the week. By the way, tune in to Nashville Sounds Baseball tonight on 102.5 The Game. The Sounds got they have a doubleheader tonight. First, Horizon Park against Toledo, AAA affiliate of the Detroit Tigers, a team that beat the Red Sox last night. The Red Sox, another team struggling right now since the trade deadline. Pre-game show with Jeff Hem is starting at 5:50. First pitch is at 6:05. Nashville Sounds Baseball tonight on 102.5 The Game, presented by 312 Pizza Company and Farm Bureau Health Plans. So Jeff Hem will be ready to roll. Sounds continue having a really good season. Now, one thing I wanted to hit on, Elijah, as we wrap things up, just a little perspective on the Predators. I heard that clip. We played it during the break there. Ryan Porth sort of challenging the whole competitive rebuild. Where are they? Are they getting better? Are they better? I think it's a very fair question. It's probably the question being asked right now as we sit here today. I listened to Elliot Friedman's podcast. That was the question that Jeff Merrick asked Elliot. But I want people to keep this in mind. At this stage of the offseason last year, and the dates were different because the whole calendar is messed up, but and we're still catching up. If you were to evaluate the Predators a couple of days after free agency started last year, what would you know about them? They didn't have Mikhail Granlund. They didn't have Eric Haula. So those two guys, think about the contributions they made to last year's team. And I think it's pretty clear they would not have made the playoffs last year without those two guys. Fair to say?
Oh, very fair. Yeah, Granlund being tied as your leading scorer was very important to that team.
And I know it's easy to get caught up in, because there was just a big thing with the expansion draft, then you had the entry draft, and then you had free agency. All of that was a whirlwind. And a lot of times, once you get to the end of the first wave of free agency, where the big names go and the initial spend happens, it's easy to start saying, well, okay, look at their team. What I'm here to tell you is I really think, based on what's happened the last few years, the Predators have been pretty good at waiting, being patient, seeing what is still out there, and then adding to their team late. You go back to Mike Ribeiro years ago, late pickup. Turned out to be a really good pickup that made a big difference on a team that doesn't
contributed. Yeah.
I don't know what was being thrown around in the summer of 2014, but nobody was pretty. They just made the change to Peter Laviolette. There was a lot up in the air, and I don't think anybody predicted the Predators to make the playoffs. I don't think anybody, but they picked up Derek Roy, Mike Ribeiro, Olli Jokinen. There was some late
the
guys.
James Neal trade beforehand too, wasn't it?
Yes, that was early from the initial free agency. And you make those little moves that don't necessarily make headlines. I'm not saying this is going to happen again this year, but I go back to the Haula Granlund last year. I look at the cap space that they have, and I feel like there's another move that's going to be made. It may not even be made before the season starts. It might be made after the season starts. But I just would caution, when everybody is saying, well, what are they doing? what's this competitive rebuild? Are they better? What's the plan? Should they be trading more people off? There's still some things that are not finished yet. They're going to space that once all of that's done, I still think they've got some room to tinker with. I'll just give you a couple of things that might be out there that I have no idea if the Predators are interested in this or not, but it looks to me like they need another veteran forward into the mix. It won't screw up the pathway of Tomasino, Glass, all the other young guys that got in there last year. I still think there's a space there for a good, solid veteran in their middle six, and that's just me. But they would have the cap room to go do that. And just for a couple examples of things that still haven't shaken out. Jack Eichel still hasn't been traded. That's something that's coming. It could happen any day. There's going to be some dominoes that start falling depending on who he's traded to. There's Vladimir Tarasenko in St. Louis. That's a volatile situation. St. Louis has got to move on from him. He doesn't want to be there. They don't really want him there, but they also don't want to give him away. I'm not even sure if the Predators are interested in Tarasenko. If they are, there's kind of a waiting game. If you wait it out, maybe you get him for next to nothing.
The value will go down the closer to the start of the season. Yeah,
because
exponentially.
They have got to part ways. Now, it's a division rival, so I don't know what twist that puts on it. But I'm envisioning, like, if you're sitting back and you're saying, we got the room for Tarasenko, but we don't want to give anything up for him. Do the Blues even get desperate enough where the phone's just not ringing to where they basically give him to you, almost like Arizona was given Shane Gostisbehere and got a couple of draft picks just to take the contract? Is there we'll retain some of the salary or we'll offset some of the salary to take? I don't know if it gets to that point for the St. Louis, but I'm just saying, even if it doesn't, whenever Tarasenko does get moved, there could be other dominoes that fall. There's other guys that might pop free to where you can get a good, solid pickup that's not a sexy pickup. There's also, we asked Elliot Friedman about Thomas Tatar, a solid 20-goal guy almost every year. He's out there. He hasn't done it in the playoffs, and so that's hurt his draft stock or his free agent stock. Is that a guy that you can wait out and grab him on a kind of a
and not have to negotiate with another team to kind of have to do as well? And that's the biggest thing with the Tarasenko thing is you are playing a little bit of a waiting game to wait for that value to go down, because like you said, the closer the season it gets, the lower it's going to be. The tag for him, or the price tag for him, will be a lot lower.
Tatar is a lot like Granlund last year. He's sitting there going, I'm a pretty good hockey player. Why is nobody offering me what I want? Which is probably a 3-year or 4-year deal. People haven't, whatever reason, they haven't bitten. It's kind of like Granlund last year. I don't know. But there are options out there, so the moral of the story is today, or my words of wisdom, don't judge the rock. All right, great show. Thanks for hanging. And Carol, ESPN 102.5, The Game.